right, thank you everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Glenn Gould Foundation's Promise of Music Forum and our session on decolonial and justice-oriented social and community music practices presented in partnership with the SIMM panel. As you may have heard, Glenn Gould was a famous Canadian pianist, but you might not know about our foundation. So I'll give you a little bit of information and then I'll be sure to introduce our next panel. Glenn Gould used his talent and celebrity to reach people beyond the confines of what was traditionally accepted during his time. A revolutionary, he bridged the human divide of the East-West Cold War barrier through his performances in the USSR. In the studio, he transformed the way that music was recorded and explored the use of new electronic technologies, television and radio, to reach a larger audience with a message larger than music itself. Finally, he set the example of the power of music to impact lives. The Glenn Gould Foundation exists to extend Canadian and international awareness of Gould's spirit and legacy by promoting innovation and excellence, promoting creativity, encouraging cultural diplomacy, and introducing programs that demonstrate the power of music and arts to transform lives. The Promise of Music is all about that. And we're so thankful that you have all joined us for many of the sessions this week, exploring a wide variety of topics related to music. So on behalf of the Foundation, thank you for spending this next session with us. I'd love to introduce our moderator for the panel, Dr. Lucas Pairo.
Thank you, Evelyn. So before starting this session, I just want to introduce myself, Lucas Pairo. I'm from Belgium, and I'm a founder and heading the international scholarly network called SIMM, which is the abbreviation for Social Impact of Music Making. And we, since 10 years, we bring together scholars who are doing research on what the role may be, or the roles may be, of music in social and community work. And so you can find all the information on the website of SIMM about this. And so we took the initiative to have a series of SIMM sessions within this conference. And this is the last one. And I'm looking forward personally very much to this one, because I think I, as a Belgian, can learn a lot from the wonderful people that are here part of this panel, because to learn about decolonizing, I can even not say the words well, decolonizing music is something that we in Belgium can learn a lot from the many initiatives and already some good experience that you have here in Canada. And I would like to start to give the floor to Diana Yerishuk from Wilfrid Laurier University.
In a spirit of gratitude and humility, and in recognition of the enduring richness and weight of a troubled history, we gather today in this place of congress, acknowledging that the place on which we stand is located on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the traditional home of the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee peoples. This territory lies within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement from time immemorial between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Anishinaabe, and allied nations to peaceably share, care for, and steward the resources around the Great Lakes. May our conversations today be infused with the same spirit of sharing, caring, and mutual responsibility expressed in that covenant. Today, this meeting place continues to be the home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to gather today on this land to promote a spirit of harmony in pursuit of a better future. We recognize the historical and ongoing contributions of Indigenous peoples to our society and to all societies around the world, the historical and continuing injustices that Indigenous people endure, and the need for justice, truth, and reconciliation.
It fits so well that we're interrupted by Brian Levine saying this so much in connection to what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, that's right. And that
I mean, those land acknowledgements, I'm sure everyone in the room is quite familiar with them, and they're quite contentious now, but also the fact that that is the first thing we hear, to recognize whose land, whose stolen land this work is happening on, is really important. So I'm glad that we did get that. My name is Deanna Yarachek. I'm at Wilfrid Laurier University, which is like 100 kilometers southwest, kind of down the road. I don't know what direction we're in right now. So I live on the Haldimand Tract, which is the territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Arawandran people. It's more colonially known as Waterloo. So I just want to take my time here, about 10 minutes or so, to just share a little bit of a project I'm working on called Community Music in Canada. It's a project that is trying to identify the competencies that musicians are needing to work with and within diverse communities. So just to give you a quick overview, I won't be able to introduce all of these to you today, but these are the 8 sites, so 8 organizations, music organizations or musicians that are working across Canada from coast to coast. And all working in like what we've been calling culturally complex contexts. So really like particularly interested in Indigenous spaces, in spaces with immigrants and refugees, in spaces working with adults with disabilities. There's a lot of different differences that are represented in the work of these incredible 8 organizations and folks. So I'm going to just introduce to you just a couple key ideas around these competencies that musicians were demonstrating to do their work well within and across these big sociocultural differences. And the research is a videography project, so I'm very excited to share this with you because what it means is that I can share clips of the videos so you can actually hear the artists themselves in their own words, in their own voices, see their work in their context. And that was really important to be able to bring their voices into the room today. And so they described and showed these competencies, and I use that word because it makes sense academically, and I coordinate an undergraduate community music program, so I'm trying to figure out what do those students need to know to be able to go out into the world and do work in a good way that's not damaging, that's like helpful, uplifting, amplifying work. So I'm thinking about competencies in terms of values, attitudes, dispositions, skills, and knowledge. So just to give you a sense of that's the full package. I'm not going to get into it any more than that. We can talk about it later. But I'm just going to make a few key points here. So what these musicians showed is there is these, of course, complex and nuanced set of competencies that I've kind of been trying to describe as radical responsiveness, because I think and I'm sure many of you are practitioners, like musicians need to be responsive to their participants, to their students, and community musicians need to be responsive to their groups, so they have to be skilled musicians, they have to be able to respond and navigate the social dynamics of a group. I think that's baked into this process. But in these particular cases, we saw something that was, like it was that, and it was incredibly nuanced and flexible in understanding and holding these really complex historical social dynamics. So I'm sort of playing around with this term of radical responsiveness to try to focus on how community musicians are focusing on relationship in the work that they're doing. So I'm just going to give you a touch on a few key ideas that came through. And the first thing I want to talk about is this navigating an insider-outsider relationships. And what that really is how community musicians are navigating and reflecting on their own positionality in relation to the people with whom they're working. And so, hang on, I lost my spot here. So we noticed, like, we're thinking about an insider and outsider because sometimes it mattered that the person is a part of the community that they're serving. This is particularly true in an Indigenous context, so Indigenous-led music projects. That means there's self-determination and empowerment within communities to make the decisions and programming and that aligns with the values and worldviews within that particular context. So, for example, you'll hear here from Rosa John, who is from Kahiwan Native Dance Theatre, just outside of Edmonton. And she's the artistic director of Kahiwan Native Dance Theatre, works and lives in Kahiwan Cree Nation for over 40 years with Melvin John, who's her husband and co-partner for the organization. And they did a music project where they partnered with a non-Indigenous group to lead this project. So you're going to hear her talk about how carefully they thought through whether they would say yes to this opportunity. And you'll also see how they maintain control over the whole project and process. And it was only Indigenous leaders who worked and facilitated those music projects, all the music projects with the kids. It was a song creation project with Indigenous youth from 4 reserve schools in central Alberta. So you'll hear from Rosa, and then right after this, you'll see a clip from Tarek Giri, who's here actually in Toronto, works with Noor Kadan in a project called Music from Hope. And they work with recently landed refugee children that are still in the hotels near the Toronto airports. And they do music creation and improvisation workshops and nonviolent communication with those kids who are there for about a month at a time. So you'll hear a little bit about Tarek. They also were refugees coming to Canada, so that they'll also talk about their shared experience there.
One of the important things about this project was that an outside group came to us. And we never really had something like that happen. And at first we were very cautious and we talked about it between ourselves, all of us, even our advisory group, and our late elder, Julia. We all talked about it. And it was kind of scary, but we decided to do it because of the healing that we were told was going to be a part of it. Our lead producer, Cindy Paul, who was just a true gift to us. She came out of nowhere. And it was like, wow, you're fantastic, great. And we had different artists come. We had Deb Hoole as one of our artists. We've had Tony Duncan as one of our artists. We had Melvin John come in as one of our producers. And so it's been really constantly changing. The kids are very adaptable.
Also we came as a refugee to Canada. So also we came from difficult life also. So we feel these kids. We feel they're disappointed sometimes. We feel their depression. We feel their anxiety. We feel their, searching for a new home. We feel that. So if you have this experience, it's also very helpful.
So you can see how in both of those examples, they are showing a deep understanding of their participants and their context that they're working in through that shared experiences, shared cultures, shared identities. But I do want to say that even within those shared experiences, they also recognize the differences. There's not an assumption that everything is all the same. So Rosa, for example, is Indigenous. She is Taino, which is an Indigenous group from Cuba. And she and Melvin talked about being culturally responsive, like this project is culturally responsive to this particular community context, this area, that it may not be it's not like you can just roll it out across any Indigenous community. So they were very careful to note those differences. And Noor and Tarek similarly were careful to assume, they don't assume that they know what their participants have gone through. They don't make any assumptions that way, but there's an empathy built in because of that shared experience. So I think the question hanging in the air is what happens if the community musician is an outsider to that community that they're working with. So here it's crucial to build those trusting relationships, so to build trust and approach that work with humility and with curiosity. I think curiosity was the number one word that kept coming up over and over amongst our participants, that they follow the participants' lead. So this is demonstrated there's a couple examples here of folks working with people with disabilities. So here you're going to hear from Brian Vino, who's the project coordinator of the Vancouver Adapted Music Society, which is Canada's first fully accessible recording studio. And then you'll hear from Louise, who's Louise Campbell. And she's based in Montreal. She's done a lot of participatory creative music projects with many people, but in particular here with adults with severe disabilities. And you'll notice the importance of being genuinely interested in getting to know the other person. There is an actual spark to want to know someone.
You just have to understand where people are coming from. And if you don't understand, just still let it happen. And it's just also a lot of conversation. So you just kind of open your eyes a little more into the life of someone with a disability. And so working with so many different types of people with different types of disabilities, you start to get a bigger understanding of how to approach something, how to ask proper questions, how to make people feel comfortable and not feel like the odd one out. Because at the end of the day, we're all just people, we're all just trying to make music.
As far as being a musician, like I've always been somebody who likes to connect with people, and I think that's the other half of this question, is that I've always just been really curious about people, and curious about their experience of the world, and how they live it and how they experience it. Particularly with the clients at CARE, many of them have very different experiences than I do, because their bodies and their minds work so differently than mine. So it really is a real privilege to be able to take that time to sit and just be with them for a while and try to understand how life is for them and what it is that they have to share.
So you can see there that there is a genuine interest to connect. And the thing, I don't know if it's clear here, but what we were really struck by is that they were interested to connect socially and artistically. And that was another key piece, that they really wanted to, they assumed everyone is bringing some artistic something to the table, and there was excitement in exploring and sharing and co-creating something together. That was a really key idea amongst a lot of the folks that we worked with. So it wasn't I've got the music, I'm bringing it to you because you've got nothing. It was like, what artistic practices, what things can you do, what things can I do, and what can we create together? It was a very different, it feels subtle, but it's also like massive shift in how you're thinking through how music is made together in a way that tries to create something new. So I would also say then, which might already be clear, is that there's a focus on relationship. Community musicians need this deep understanding of the context and the participants that they're working with, and they need to build relationships as much as possible and invest in those relationships over time. In fact, several of the organizations that we worked with actually created pathways for participants to become leaders within their organization. So that was a key piece. So building capacity so that the participants actually could take on leadership roles. That seemed to be a key piece amongst those places that had more sustained programming over time. So these are just a couple points that I'm just summing up here, that we've got this insider-outsider sense of positionality, the building and sustaining of relationships, that there's a balance of musical and social competencies coming up, and of artistic outcomes as well as social outcomes. But the artistic outcomes are actually really important. It's not just social impacts, although those things are indivisible also in a way. We could talk about that if we want to get into it. And of course, a deep knowledge of place and context. So I just, let's see, if I've lost track of time. How are we doing, Lucas? We've got like 2 more videos. Do we have time for it?
You're good. I think you're, yeah.
I'm good? Well, awesome, great. Because I would like to go through 2 more pieces here of this idea of responsiveness. Radical responsiveness is really understanding that power dynamics, and it leads to an extremely adaptive approach to meeting these shifting and sometimes competing needs of participants. It's quite complex work. So for instance, you'll see here, this is Caroline Hissa. She's the executive director of the Community Music School of Waterloo Region. They offer free music lessons to kids who come from families who can't afford it. And most of those kids are from newcomer families, or from families with low income. So you're gonna hear from her about the kind of competing reasons that kids come in and the way they try to meet those needs. And then you'll hear again from Tarek and from Noor about the way that they have a plan and they like throw that plan out the window whenever they need to really meet the kids and celebrate those kids for where they at. So here's just a quick clip here.
So many kids from so many different cultures. It's always very interesting to find out what their goals are for their music lessons. And for some kids, social capital of taking a music lesson is a big deal. And they're not interested in getting to know other people in your program. They want to take a music lesson, they want to get to know their teacher, they want to become a really good pianist, and that's what's important to them. And the community piece is so important to me, but I find it's also really important to honor that reality for that child and that family. And there are a lot of kids with parents who are hurting and parents who are not healthy, and trying to just make sure that what we provide for those kids is completely different from those other kids who just want to learn an instrument. And making sure that we're able to meet all those kids no matter what, and trying to adjust our programming to fit all of the different competing priorities that we have. It can be a little bit tricky, but it's also really important.
Of course, you need to prepare for the workshop, but when you go there and something happens, or the kids, they don't like this kind of exercise, let's say, or maybe they create something from my exercise. So you need to improvise and go with them, and and change the whole workshop.
We need to keep in mind that in the workshop, and we want to accommodate everybody equally. We don't want to give attention to that person without that person. And this is what we use in a workshop. If that kid start yelling or start jumping on walls, we have to all jump on walls because we want to be, this is not weird, this is what we're doing now. Because this is what I want to do, we're not dictating the workshop, we're flowing.
So you can see there's this kind of like radical responsiveness in fully supporting those participants. And so it's clear too that this doesn't mean there's no plan. Absolutely every single person talked about the importance of needing a plan and needing the structure, but also emphasized flexibility and the need to be able to let go of the plan entirely if you need to. So you can tell that that's an incredible amount of skill and knowledge required to meet the context in a really good way. So finally, I just want to emphasize that amongst all of these things, which are really important, critically important, every single person also focused on the importance of fun and joy. And it's particularly true, it's true for every single community, but I'm going to end here with a focus on the Indigenous communities, back to Rosa and Melvin John, where they're pointing out how the pain is there, but it's important to focus on joy, and it's important to focus on agency, that kids have choices about how they involved, if they're involved, and in what way, to what extent. So I'm going to leave you with their words, and you'll get just a small clip of the music video for their song Mistatim, which they created while we were visiting them.
What's really important to come out of here is songs that are not just about pain. Yes, of course, there's going to be pain, because a lot of these kids have been through lots of stuff, just like Indigenous kids all over the world have been. So who's going to be reading? One of the things that I have learned the most is to just let the kids, just let them go, and you let the guitars go, you let the keyboard, you let the singer sing, you let this one that just wants to say one word, they can just say one word, And so what I found is that within the time that we were doing the program, we saw who likes to do what.
All right, I'm going to leave it there, but if you are interested, so these are micro documentaries. They're all under 15 minutes. There's 8 of them posted to our YouTube channel there. So if you're interested in seeing the full documentaries, here are the ones that I didn't get a chance to talk about today. They're all available to you there. And thanks very much for your time. I'm going to pass it on to Kathy, maybe? Okay. Oh, I think this is the podium.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Hi everyone. Really great to be here this morning and all week. It's been such an exciting week. My name's Kathy Armstrong, and I'll just mention a couple things about myself before I get started on the project that I'm going to tell you about. This is, it's kind of like coming home here. I'm from Toronto originally. I have lived in Ottawa for about the last 30 years and working at Carleton University, which is on unceded Algonquin territory. But I've also had the pleasure of spending about 35 years as a guest of the Ewe people in Ghana, in the Volta region of Ghana. And so I'm really thrilled to be able to kind of bring some of those worlds together. this panel is really about community music practices, and so I'm in a unique position because I ran an intercultural community music program for 25 years in Ottawa, a West African drum and dance ensemble for all ages, and it was sort of an after-school community-based program. And with that program, I had complete flexibility of talking to whoever I wanted to, hiring whoever I wanted to, building relationships in Ghana, building relationships with Ghanaians here in Canada, deciding to do a fundraiser to support some electrification of the village that I was going to, being able to pivot and do concerts and other kinds of support, different kinds of charities and things like that we wanted to, and change the programming if I wanted to, and that was wonderful. However, working in a community music situation gave me, it's a lot of work, as those of you who are in that field know, and being able to sustain the infrastructure of something like that through grants and space, facilities, those kinds of things were challenging. So while there was a lot of artistic freedom in making music in the community and being able to pivot and do things that I wanted to do, it was really challenging in other ways. Sort of in tandem, I was working part-time at Carleton University, and I had an ensemble there as well. And so that was interesting because I would actually bring those two groups together back and forth, and we would use resources from each that would sort of enhance the others. So that was great for a while, and then since 2020, I closed my community organization in 2020 as planned. It was a planned closure that coincided with the pandemic, and for a few reasons which I won't go into here, but it was sort of time to do that. And so now I have an ensemble at Carleton University that I'm putting most of my energy in. And again, being at an institution, I have some great infrastructure. I know that the ensemble is going to continue year after year, but the other things are kind of slow. Like, who can I hire? Is there extra money to bring in culture bearers? Can I do community engaged projects? And is there time to do that? Do the students, want to do that, or are they just, how are we going to, work on this? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about a project that I've been working on. Called Reimagining the Global Music Ensemble. And so even though this is about a post-secondary ensemble, it's really using a lot of the input that I have from all the work that I did in the community. So this was sponsored by the Research Centre for Music, Sound and Society in Canada, whose director, Dr. Ellen Waterman, is here today and has been here all week, which was really lovely for us to be able to start this project. So, most of us, since the time of 2020, when everything sort of came to a head, the murder of George Floyd, and just a little bit before that, the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, there was a lot of things coming together at the same time. And so we wanted to really, with this project, look at, even though this has been an older question, we wanted to look at what is a responsible model for a global music ensemble in post-secondary music studies now. So, and the interesting thing is that even though, as I said, like with an institution, things can be a bit slowed down in terms of making changes, curricular changes and things like that, the ensembles are a little bit more nimble than, say, a course or a required course. So ensembles, as Linda Pierce says, can encompass a space that puts theory into conversation with practical music making. So the ensemble itself was founded in 2007 when we had a donor that gave some money for the drums. And it brings in students from mostly the music program at Carleton, but we are open to other students if they hear about us, but they don't get credit for it. So they would sort of do it like a club or something like that. So this is something that really has evolved over the years. And so this was the group that we actually did the study with. So this is part of these kinds of ensembles. Most of you would know this. Post-secondary ensembles will have, band, orchestra, choir, and then many universities have global ensembles as well. So we're part of a tradition. And I think when we first started the study, we realized there was about 100 different programs in North America that had global music ensembles. So we did reach out to everyone for this. So the kind of framework that I'm thinking about, because this project did finish in 2023, so I've been thinking a lot about this since then, and the kind of framework that that I'm looking at is around culturally responsive teaching, which Deanna alluded to in her talk, and also participatory musics, because many global music ensembles have those elements of participatory music making, which is engagement, responsiveness. You're looking at things not just about performance, but things that are looking at engagement valued over the excellence of the performance sometimes. So, and then what's really interesting, what really brought it together for me was this concept of interest convergence that Juliet Hess has talked about. So, at that time, at 2020, when everybody was kind of thinking a lot about the same things, there was an opportunity there. And so this is a time when we can make some strategies for action. So this was not a new sort of hope and dream of mine. I've always been interested in these things, but there were so many other people that wanted to get on board. So in terms of funding, in terms of opportunities, that interest convergence happened during that time that we did this. So I'll just briefly go over what we did. We had 3 different events, 2 of them on Zoom, which was wonderful, initiating with Brainerd Blyden-Taylor, who is here in Toronto. And then we interviewed a bunch of different ensemble directors across North America, and then we also had a community consultation in Ottawa. And then we also, Stacey Kantamaclo, who's a former grad student at Carleton, who's from Ghana, did some interviews with a bunch of different global directors, just to look at, were other people thinking about the same kinds of, issues that we were. So I won't read through all of these. You can find them and all the interviews on the website for the Carleton Research Centre for Music, Sound and Society in Canada, and I've got the link there for you. But basically, as I said at the beginning of my presentation, there's pros and cons to having these ensembles. So some of the advantages were that you can actually open up new spaces if you're having allies with you and different groups of people meeting together to do intercultural work. And that collective music making is transformative, as we've seen in some of the videos that Deanna was showing. And there's lots of space for collaboration between the community. So this is the part that's really interesting to me, is just that because I come from a lot of community work, the idea that the university is not really a static space. It's a space that people can actually engage with in the community. And again, to your point, it's about the context of where you are. So what we do in Ottawa is going to be very different than, say, what the ensembles at York are doing, or at U of T or Laurier. So we have opportunities in Carleton that would work for us in the Ottawa area. So, and of course there's lots of challenges too. We're required to do end of term concerts, and there's sort of colonial structures in not only the way that our ensembles are set up, but also in just the way that the music is there. So we have to try to rise above those kinds of things. And often the culture bearers who are teaching these courses are marginalized, maybe not full faculty. I know in the case of our ensembles, and I started myself as a part-timer, that we just really were brought in to teach the ensembles and not as full faculty. So that's something that our university is looking at. All universities have been called on to do this kind of decolonizing work, and same in the public schools. So that's something that we're working on. And then I think something we're all facing is just this issue around arts and humanities in general are just losing ground. And so it's very hard to keep that going. We have lots of students of African origin at Carleton University, but they're taking computer science, and they're not interested in being part of, or they might be taking engineering, or they're not really interested in doing the traditional arts like that. So after we did all this research for a year or so, we did a renewal year with the ensemble to try to see if we could make some of the changes that we looked at. And one of the things we did that was really critical was, as I mentioned, I closed down my community organization, Baobab, in 2020, but we took some seed funding that was left over, and as a legacy project, we made an endowed fund at Carleton. And as I said, because of this idea of interest convergence, a lot of people got excited about that. Oh, and the university matched the funding. So we suddenly have this endowed fund that I can use to bring culture bearers into work with the university, which I didn't have before. So we call it the Baobab Collaborative Arts Fund. So that was really great to have that set up. And then, as luck would have it, a wonderful Ghanaian who's a specialist in popular dance, Benedictus Matson, was working at Queen's on his PhD. So we brought him in for the winter term to work with our students. So in this renewal year, and I actually have a little bit of video here which I'll show because I know they set this up for me. We tried to expand the repertoire from, and I don't have time to go into all of the things, but we tried to expand it into some diasporic styles and also some urban styles, and just try to get away from that kind of colonial presentational work of here's the drum and dance ensemble, and this is packaging it all up as a little commodity to send around. So we were looking at other ways to do things. So here's a little bit of high life music that we did with some of the students. Oh, I wanted to show you this high life one first. Let's see if I can do that. And then we did a wonderful sort of urban dance called a Zonto dance, which is very popular in Ghana. And the students all learned the routine and really loved it. And it just kind of fulfilled our mandate to try to have more contemporary styles. So it's just a little bit of what we did in the final performance that year. I wanted to go back just a little bit. So as I've finished this project, I'm thinking a lot about I'm proposing this new framework of sustainable approaches that really looks at the different ways that we can all think about these. And they could be transferable in general terms, but again, the local context is just so important. So thinking about sustainable, looking for artistic and economic sustainability, broaden the methods and practices, working with different experts and culture bearers, so that you're not expecting one culture bearer to represent the whole culture, right? You can work with different people, feel out what their expertise is, and then apply it to the situation. And just thinking about those traditions as complex traditions and not as one separate thing. And then thinking about the ensemble as a conduit between the university and the community, right? So that we have that kind of back and forth that sometimes is missing in institutional work. So what's really interesting to me now, 5 years out from the pandemic and when all of this first started for our project, is that things are kind of shrinking again. And funding in post-secondary schools in Ontario is just so precarious right now. And so some of the things that opened up around EDI and people giving support for those things are really kind of closing down a little bit now. So I'm mindful that we were very lucky to actually do this at a time in that sense of that interest convergence when all these things came together at the same time. So I don't know if that could be replicated again, but luckily we got our little endowed fund. It's not a huge one, but we've got something going, and I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to sustain it. So far, we've been able to sustain it every year, what we're doing with the ensemble, and so that's exciting for us, but again, it just feels a little bit precarious. So I just wanted to thank some of the collaborators, Ellen, who's here today, and everyone else who was part of that. So that's really all I wanted to talk about with this this project. So thank you very much.
So Karen, thank you. Karen Sears from Wilfrid Laurier University.
Yes, could you start it from here? Good.
So this is the, yeah, turn it on, and this is the clicker to go to the next slide.
Okay, great, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Karen Zaros, and I am an assistant professor at Wilfrid Laurier University. Yeah. We actually have offices beside each other, so. Just a little background on myself. I am Jamaican from the accent. Some people might not say that because obviously I don't really sound Jamaican, but you know, I've always been Jamaican. And you know, I come to where I am as an ethnomusicologist through various avenues. I started off as a piano teacher, and all of these things that I'm going to say to you will make sense when you hear my project, right? Started off as a piano teacher, did an LRSM with the Associated Board of Rural Schools Music. Then I went into music education, deep roots in music education in Jamaica, because it was there that I realized that a lot of the methods that we were using did not really honor our traditions in Jamaica, and that we could learn so much more and help our teachers so much more if we used our own resources. And that helped me to, and that kind of motivated me to write a couple of books many years ago in the 90s. 1998 was the first one, Music for Big Ants and Little Ants, where I used our history to create books for music schools, for music education, right? Used in high schools, very interesting book. And then I wanted to learn more, and so I came to Canada, and I did a master's and a PhD in ethnomusicology. And there I learned about, you know, I had amazing mentors and supervisors, Rob Bowman and Bob Whitmer. Uncle Bob, we call him. And learned really, spent a lot of years there learning how to become a good ethnomusicologist, really listening to my community, really having conversation, building relationships, approaching by learning and understanding what is going on, really listening to people and not going with your ideas like, I know what your problem is, no. Asking them what they need, listening to them, finding out what is going on. And then afterwards, I got involved with community music in a very interesting way with Richard Marcella, because it was at York University where I did my PhD that the Helen Carlswell Chair in Community Engaged Research in the Arts started. And I was very fortunate to be on the ground zero level where the whole idea started, and we had our meetings with the dean and started the whole project. I was there for 4 years and really learned from the ground up, because the project was a three-way partnership, and as researchers we were there working with this community music organization. We were very fortunate because the project was amazing. We were endowed with a full endowment that we were giving away $100,000 every year. And all we had to do was to, what our job was to have proposals come in, vet the proposals, and have was walk with researchers as they went through their projects. And it was there in that process, working with a community music organization, RPSM at the time, Toronto Community Music Schools, I think it's called now, that the whole idea of co-learning was really drummed into my head, because I saw from their side what that meant, and from the researcher side, the problems that can happen when you don't listen, right? When you really don't listen. And so when I came to Waterloo, when I assumed this position at Waterloo, I was introduced to the community music organization. Well, it's not a community music organization, sorry. It was a community organization called Adventure for Change. And let me see if I can remember how to do this right. Adventure for Change. And so I, with all of these attitudes and learning that I had, and at the time I became the director of the Shepherd Institute for the Study of Contemporary Africa. And that's a network of researchers that are concerned about issues related to Africa and the African diaspora. And I was introduced to Adventure for Change, and I went there just to listen. They had programs that were, supported by a lot of social work, but they didn't have a sustained music program. I know Diana worked with them with the Gahu project, but they wanted something ongoing, program for music. And so that's where I came in, and they asked me, what can I do? So I went in and I listened to the kids, and I just visited there a couple times, just listening to them. And I said, okay, well, how would you want me to help you? And they said, how about Africa Camp? And so I started to develop programming for Africa Camp, which is a week-long camp that they have in the summer, at the end of July. So this is about Africa Camp and what I learned from that. So, okay. So as I said, Adventure for Change is a community organization in Waterloo. They serve communities that are from the Horn of Africa. So a lot of, persons from Ethiopia, Eritrea, and so the students there are, they're all from African descent, but some of them have different backgrounds. Some of them are Muslim. It's a variety of persons of African descent. Of course, I'll always say African descent because when persons of African descent come to North America, quite often we start to call them black, as if their nationalities just somehow disappeared. So it's important to understand, and I understood from my own experience and from the experience of my children that we say African descent and avoid as much as possible saying black, because we want to make sure that we honor where they come from, right? So so understanding that and developing a program for these kids was tricky. I had to kind of see, okay, it's not a monolith, right? There are various cultures here. How do we approach a music camp from their lenses, from what their own experiences are, and from the resources that we had? So I wanted to make sure that the programs that I had was identity, the need was identity affirmation. That was the whole idea behind Africa Camp, that they came away with a sense of their heritage as a continent, right? Healing from the kind of trauma that they may go through. And for this particular group, there was a lot of trauma. As someone who had an interest and was building a relationship with this community, saw the kind of injustice that these little children would go through. I, at one point, went to court with 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds who were arrested by police for very unfair reasons. So, healing is important, and of course, community building. And so the approaches, now I was very fortunate in that first year that we had a program, an exchange program with the University of Ghana, and of course, the pictures are taken this way, purposefully. On one side, you will see, the right side, persons dancing, right? And on the other side, we have a circle game. So I wanted to use methods that reconnected music and dance, because what I learned from my co-learning with the community and with a very pleasant intelligent, wonderful MA student, exchange student that came from the University of Ghana, Mary Amontan, right? Mary. That, in fact, music and dance is connected. It's not separated. And I was like, wow, there you go. All this time. And so, you know, coming from my background with, you know, music, I was, even from the African diaspora, the colonial project is still alive and well, right? Where we don't realize that there are different ways of approaching this. And so in that first year with my project with Adventure for Change, Mary, who is in the genes here, you know, introduced music and dance to the kids, and that was a huge success. We also did ring games, and the ring game that you see at the side there, the kids are sitting down and they're passing a ball, is a ring game that is also present in Ghana and in Jamaica. In Jamaica we call it Manuel Road, and in Ghana it's called Samsa Chroma. So I thought that was really amazing that we had these two, this one game, two songs, and that they were so linked. So that was a huge learning moment for me. And then I also wanted to consider, and I wanted to share with you something that I thought was really pretty interesting, and this is coming from my ethnomusicology hat. The fact that the way rhythm is taught in Africa and in many indigenous communities is through utterances, right? And in Jamaica, so coming from the Afro-diasporic background, we have two rhythms there, down, the gully, down. So when musicians are teaching other musicians, they use utterances. So it's down the gully, and that's down the gully. And the other one is gully, go pick it up, gully, go pick it up. But when you think about prescriptive and descriptive transmission, which is transcription, sorry, prescriptive and descriptive transcription, oh my head. You know, and that's how we code music when we go into a community. We have to also consider, how are we going to teach this? Trying to teach down the gully down is dependent on my accent. So if the children don't have the accent, no matter what you do, it's going to take them a long time. It's going to be frustrating. So the prescriptive coding of that is for down the gully. I'd say Gail, Samantha, Gail, Samantha. Okay. So it's good because they know those names and they're able to do it in that way. And for the other one, Gully, go pick it up, Gully, go pick it up, Mary Olivia, Mary Olivia, Mary Olivia. So I had to use ways that they could understand the rhythm that I wanted. But even though I'm not teaching them the patois, the concept is still indigenous. And here is an example of what happened in one of our sessions. Okay, it's not. All right, hold on. Wait. It's not moving. It's not moving to the slide. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, just use
Okay.
the
Okay, thank you. So here is a workshop that I did with Adventure for Change. This was their music camp, which happens a couple weeks before Africa Camp. And this other one. So they're all using utterances to play it, and this was in the first 5 minutes, so it wasn't perfect, but okay. All right, so that was the first 5 minutes, and what you saw was the volunteers in their own way trying to teach what I taught them, because it was they were put in various groups to do this, right? At the end, it was better, but I don't have footage of the end, so you're seeing the beginning. and then came Africa Camp, and if you look here, I don't know if you can see, or here it is. So we have the program for Africa Camp, and the footage I have got lost when my computer crashed and died. So this is all I could find. So I said, let me bring something at least. So because it was funded through the Shepherd Institute, they had a Shepherd Institute. We were there every day, and there were classes on the marimba, right? And then they had a demonstration at their City Hall, right, which went very well. And here, the approach I used was using an Afro-diasporic soundstage for music drills. So they were playing the marimba, and the marimba is a pitched instrument, as you know, right? So my idea was to create this soundstage for them. They're going to be learning, the pitches and playing the techniques with their mallets and so on. But we want to make sure that they have a soundstage, and this is what I mean. What I had created were soundtracks that would accommodate any playing of one pitch. And so they could use the rhythms that they learned in previous classes to play. The two that I have here, we had several more, but the two that I'm going to play for you is D and E. And so this was D. And as I said, this is just a sound stage for them to feel that they're learning to play the learning technique, but they're learning within a diasporic sound stage. So I'm gonna play this one for you. So what you're hearing is the recorder, but then they would come in and play their mallets in groups. All right. And then the second one, I went forward. The second one was E. So they would play E in any rhythm, there's no losing, you're just playing E, and it would accommodate that. And so that, they were very encouraging. It was lively music. It was based on steel pan and reggae and a lot of Afro-diasporic jams, So it was fun to learn, and they really loved it. And yes, so those are 3 techniques I used based on my experience. And, I approach this, and I encourage you to approach all your work from a position of helping and co-learning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all 3 of you, presentations. And we invited Nicole Schultz to also be with us. I would like you to shortly present yourself as a facilitator, and maybe also already give us maybe a question or a remark about one of the presentations that you just heard.
Thanks. Good. Thank you. I'm honored to be on this panel of wonderful scholar thinkers. My name is Nicole Schutz. I am Métis from Prince Edward, Saskatchewan. One of the 3 distinct Indigenous communities of Canada. I've grown up from Prince Edward, Saskatchewan, Treaty 6 territory, and I'm now based in Edmonton, which is still part of Treaty 6 territory. I am a elementary music educator, turned into a consultant recently. I've been working on indigenizing and decolonizing music education for the last 10 years. We have come, Deanna and I have kind of crossed paths in this work of decolonizing music practices. And I actually taught her children in Edmonton for a couple of years. And so I've been, after I studied my master's in music education with an Indigenous lens, I've been able to do a couple of research projects. One of them, Deanna and I are trying to hold on to with no funding, but we are working on different projects with that, and I'm involved in a Métis music song study with a colleague. And my goal has been, I guess as a music educator, when you have a prescribed curriculum and you have things that you have to do, how do you bridge the gap between community music making and the classroom? And so I've been helping teachers navigate, when you have a curriculum that doesn't, the curriculum that I'm using is from 1989, and so it's better than the proposal that was once given, and so we're happy to work with this one. Do we all know this? But I've been able to navigate and help other music educators navigate. How do you not other culture music, because it's considered ethnic music, and it took me a long time to learn how to do that. My colleague Cheryl Suey-Pegaham, my partner in music education, has been really helpful and kind of leading teachers through a way of different thinking, how to not manipulate, but use the curriculum in a way that doesn't other as best as we can. And so there is some of these differences with community music making that I was really, there was a common theme about the centeredness of humanity, and that's what comes first. And the building of relationships in the work that I've been able to do with working with elders and bringing them into classrooms, your timetable, when you have 30-minute classes that gets, you have something new happening every 30 minutes, you have to put that aside when you're working with community. And so I guess maybe that's one of my questions for the three of you when you were working with community and different cultural, I'm trying to think of maybe understanding of where you're coming from. How did you build those communities? What was your starting point with building those communities? How long did it take for you to develop those relationships that are necessary with this work? Because in education, in a school, it's harder to do. You still need to do it, but how did you do it as community members and to develop your programs?
Who would like to react to this question?
So when I started Baobab Drum Dance Community in Ottawa, I already had, I guess, nearly 10 years experience in relationships with Ghanaians in Ghana. So that part of it, that relationship was there already, and I was able to, just be a facilitator to bringing, experts in to work with people. But in the Ottawa community, because I had just moved there, and I remember people saying, because it was very important to me to have an intercultural ensemble. I just felt like that was really important. And I would have people say, well, I don't know any Black, African, or I don't have any of those students in my class or whatever. I don't think they'd be interested in this thing. And I would, that was really tough at the beginning. I also had really nice connection with the Ghanaian community in Ottawa, and who really valued and supported our work, but and they wanted their children to be part of it. But first and second generation,
students from different ethnicities don't necessarily want to participate in the culture of their parents. I think that's very familiar to all of us in all kinds of ways. So that was a bit of a hurdle as well. I often would connect with people that were biracial and wanting to discover more of their roots and where the music comes from, sort of as you were talking about, Karen, like just really understanding some of the tenets of those kinds of musics, and so bringing that together. So it just did take a long time, and just working with allies in the school system, some of whom are here now, and in the community and at the NAC with Claire back there. We just sort of very slowly, but I would agree with what a few people have said tonight. The relationship piece is just huge, and relationship over time. And I think a lot of times when teachers are in the school system or even at university, we think about doing these in small chunks, but really that's not going to cut it. Like, you really have to have the relationship over time, and I think that's where the richness comes in, and that's also where the messy bits are, of course. But when it comes down to people connecting with each other, that's just way more powerful than the optics of what people might see from the outside, right? And so that's always been something for me that's really worked, is to just develop those relationships over time. But it isn't easy, for sure.
I guess like there's sort of two layers, because I didn't initiate these projects, right? I'm sort of trying to support the folks who have initiated those projects. So I'm thinking about the work that I saw there is, again, like, it is that sort of sustained relationship building, but sometimes there's like just an opportunity. So there's like, thinking of Louise Campbell, for example, working in Montreal, and she was giving clarinet lessons to the executive director of the Care Center, who's the center with the folks with the developmental disabilities. And it was in those lessons that the executive director was like, would you come and work with our folks? So it was kind of a different way where there was sort of a need where they thought it'd be great if music could be part of our programming. And Louise, being a very sensitive and caring person, was like, I don't have much experience there at the time. She now has lots. So she did actually exactly what Karen was suggesting, which is like to go and visit, and volunteered for a while and got to know them and tried to figure out, there's this fabulous statement of the documentary where she sort of describes how nervous she felt because some of those folks are nonverbal. They use different, like the Bliss method of communication, use different methods of communication, and so just feeling nervous about what if we can't make music together. And then found out this Bliss method is like a series of directions for going from 0 to 8. And she's like, oh my God, I'm a musician, 0 to 8, I could do everything with that, that's great. And then like was all of a sudden fired up to like be able to like explore the possibilities. So that's one instance where there wasn't like time for a long setup, but there was enough to try to figure that out. And she also, as everybody does, as I'm sure everyone in this room does, funding is always an issue. It's often project-based. It's really hard to sustain it. And so her strategy there is to keep finding projects to build on the previous projects. So she is investing in that community by finding funding to do the next project that builds on the project they did before. So they don't have sustained programming funding. But that's one way they do it. And then for me, like as a researcher, I expected a lot more people to tell me to F off than they did, because I was like, I'm coming with a camera crew and we're gonna film you. And I expect them to be like, no, you're not. No thanks. I didn't actually get that. I think the filming, they got control. We talked through what that process should look like, whether the participants should or should not be filmed. They got all of the footage that they could use in any way. They got a documentary. It felt like a little more collaborative than other research projects, I think. And I think with the Indigenous, like he would end up being the only Indigenous organization I focused on in this first round. Partly I wanted to be very careful about navigating those relationships. And I did like ask kind of point blank, because I was like, why did they say yes to us? Because you saw how carefully they were thought through like that partnership. And it was a bit contentious. Like they definitely sort of eventually kind of pushed out the organization, and they're just doing the project themselves. And so I was like, what? Like why did you decide to say yes? And it was because
because of a mutual friend, because I have a very dear friend of mine that turns out to be longtime family friends of the Johns. And they're like, it's because you know Miggy. And I was like, oh, okay. It's like that was the thing. Like, so it was this mutual relationship. So it, like, and that was not something I could have planned for. It was just an accident and an incredible. But it just goes to show how building these relationships in lots of ways is really important, and to know when not to push. Like I have sent a couple requests out since, like sort of seeing like what would phase 2 look like. And those ideas aren't being responded to, and I think that is the response. When I'm not hearing back, and I'm like, this is not the time for it, or I'm not the person, or it's not a project that's needed out there, and so that's not for me to do. Yeah.
Karen, I'm sure you also have something to say about this.
Thank you. Inside and outside relationships is quite relative. Yeah. So even sometimes when you look like the community, if you're an outsider, you're an outsider, right? And you always have to be very careful, how you approach a community, right? I remember when I was doing my dissertation, I was doing a Jamaican family. I was pushed out, and I had to, and I had so many years invested in it, and I had to push forward and find ways in. The way in, as Diana said just a while ago, is to find a bridge into the community. Always an introduction. Pierre Bourdieu talks about, social capital, find someone who can introduce you, who that person respects and that pushes you up. and that's what I've done. Even when it seems like this is, we look alike, so I should be an insider. Nothing works like that. No. You need a bridge in, right? And that's coming from my ethnomusicology hat right there. Somebody needs to introduce you to someone who has clout in the community. And then it's easier. Otherwise, it takes time for people to trust you. And when you walk into a new community, they're looking at everything. You're looking at how you dress, how you talk. You're looking for things that betray what they believe. That perhaps you are here for reasons that are not of their best interest, right? So, yeah, inside or outside, it's totally relative, right? And so it takes time, and having a friend on the inside helps. Thank you.
Anybody wants to ask a question or remark? Because we're almost at the end of the session, and we have a few minutes left. Somebody wants to ask us out here? Question, remark? No?
I have a question for Nicole. I just wondered, this is putting you on the spot, but I noticed that you talked about doing anti-colonial work and then also decolonial. Did I hear that right in your opening?
Indigenous and decolonized.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I heard anti-colonizing. So
no, not anti. No.
Okay. Then I don't have a question at all.
But I do have another one if nobody has one. And there was a common theme, so you talked about the students not wanting to participate in the culture of their parents. But my curiosity is, and we talked about healing as well, so what was the response once they were participating in their culture of their family, and what was the healing that you witnessed through that?
That's such a great question, and it's very complex. There's so many layers of colonization that are back and forth and back and forth. So one of the other things I did in my community work is I took groups of students from Canada to Ghana, and that's where the real healing takes place, because when they're there and they feel seen and they are connecting, they're eating the food, they're participating in relationships. So it's not an after-school music program, even though I bring in the orange Fanta and we have food days and we do all kinds of stuff in Ottawa.
when they actually go to Ghana, like that's where the real transformation happens. So I know that's not possible in all situations, but being seen and being in the community, and often we would play for the Ghanaian community at some of their community events, and I think so students, if they did participate, they would then feel a little bit more connected. And I'll just give you a recent example quickly. Carleton University has a new president, and he's originally from Ghana. And this was huge for me and for our music program, and we were asked to play at his special ceremony to be robed, and then there was a dinner, and his whole family came. There must have been like 30 Ghanaians, all his friends that were in North America that have all these great jobs and whatever. They all flew into Ottawa, and my group got to play this traditional bobobo, which is a kind of a get-up social dance, and all the upper administration of the university was there, and then all these people just randomly got up and just started singing and dancing, and it's like, this is what it could be like in this kind of situation. But it was a remarkable opportunity for us that I don't think would have happened, and I think it made a big difference for the students in the group of African descent who were part of that. So, and I think that, you know, of course, our president is many things, but it was wonderful that he wanted to celebrate his culture in that way at his inauguration. So, yeah.
Thank you. How wonderful to end this this session with this story. Thank you so much, all of you.